Mossy Quinn is with us this morning. We've also got Lee Keegan with us. Mossy, how are you doing?
Good, Jar, how are you?
What's the level of abuse that you got as a free taker? Was it written in blood? Were the letters written in blood?
The worst one I got, I think I told you this before, I got a phone call actually after we were beaten, I think it was 2003, I've tried to blank from my memory, probably my first year we were beaten up in Castlebar actually, I think it was 110 to 3 points. We only scored 3 points, it was probably one of our darkest days and missed a couple of frees and got a phone call on the Monday night. Some fella rang my mobile, just abused me for a couple of minutes. I was kind of in shock for a couple of seconds, then just hung up, and that was it. So
yeah,
that was probably the height of it, really, from a personal, like in terms of.
Actually, ring you to talk to you, isn't it?
Yeah, so you wouldn't know. Like I was only 21 at the time, 22. So again, you could have had someone could have been in college, or it could have been just lads who obviously might have known someone who knew someone.
Okay, yeah.
No, but it was. I didn't take it too seriously now.
And were they serious, or was it like a?
No, it was serious enough in the sense that it wasn't a group of lads laughing in the background on speakerphone, kind of going, "Oh, this is a bit of crack." Like it was someone just rang saying, "Jeez, you were brutal." Yes, that was a disgrace. Yeah. So
did Eamon McGee have a story about they used to make phone calls?
I think they tried to ring Dermot Conley. Yeah, I think they got Dermot's number for a while, and they tried to ring Dermot at night time and stuff like that. So I don't know. I actually never asked him whether that was true. Well, Eamon McGee certainly is true from his side of things. I never asked Dermot,
but I imagine if they're ringing, it's when they're pissed and they're like,
"Oh yeah, I'd imagine."
How you doing?
As
opposed to the kind of anonymous stuff.
Yeah, I would say so.
You'd hope so. Yeah. Do we have Lee Keegan with us? No, we'll get Lee in a couple of minutes because I'm interested to hear what what level he's got it at. But anyway, look, that's been a bit of a sideshow this week, which I wonder if it kind of helps the teams preparing for this weekend. That bizarrely, a referee who didn't make the cut for the All-Ireland hurling final is a bigger story in the week of the All-Ireland football semi-finals than the All-Ireland football semi-finals, which is madness. But
yeah, it's pretty incredible, all right. Yeah, I'm still trying to get my head around that one. I'm still kind of waiting for someone to pop up and say, "Look, this is a joke," or "This is like it's just ridiculous at the moment." To be honest, seeing the 6 o'clock news last night, I didn't see it live, but I just obviously saw the clip subsequently. It's just all a bit surreal, isn't it? Like a referee, but then. For me, like you could spend a long time talking about referees, but the best referees are the ones that go unnoticed and are the ones that kind of to go in and do their job and are happy to get in and get out. I suppose the last 24 hours have highlighted that some of them aren't. They need more than that, and I think that's maybe that's. I don't know if it's consistent, but it's certainly not something you'd be looking out for as one of the top referees, I would say.
No, it turns out Mark Clattenburg, that style of refereeing is fairly consistent across sports. It turns out the fact that Mark Clattenburg is a brand is something that other sports have been adopting and going, yeah, that's a good idea, I want a bit of that.
Yeah, I was trying to think back to the kind of like the first referee I remember in kind of sports is Pierluigi Collina, and it was more to do with his appearance. I think was unique rather than obviously. And the minute you saw him, you identified him because he looked different than every other referee. But I have a recollection that he was a good referee rather than he was there for the limelight. You remember him because of how he looked rather than anything. Then I was trying to work out going. Obviously, the Premier League has brought this kind of celebrity referee, and you could argue in rugby, you kind of Nigel Owens is a little bit like that. But again, that's more so to do with his kind of, I would say, outside of the pitch in terms of his whole story rather than his performances. But again, also, he's a pretty good ref. Would he be considered a pretty good ref?
Yeah, I think so. Like he lets the game flow. The high-scoring games. Now people get a bit pissed off with that sometimes. That like he can let too much go, but like. Does everybody generally want the game to be good, or do they want the game to be refereed as harshly as it can be within the rules? There's
for me, like again, and without like GA referees have a tough, because like again, you sit here and you say, well, what's a tackle? How do you define a tackle? So every referee, there's a little bit of scope there. For me, the biggest thing is how a referee communicates with players. So it's my biggest bugbear that there's nothing worse than having a referee who cannot communicate with you or refuses to communicate with you. That's the most infuriating thing. Every player is not going to agree with your decision, and I'm not saying you have to explain yourself every time you blow your whistle, but sometimes if there's a big call and someone asks you a legitimate question, they ask you in a manner that's appropriate and they're not shouting at you, not roaring at you. Some referees don't even respond to you. They just, to me, it just makes situations worse. And it's very, very hard that if you're in a key moment and you want to know, like something simple, like was that on me or was it on you, or who was the one that fell there? And some of the referees won't even engage with you. And I think that's where players' frustration grows. And I think. They need to be approachable. They need to have that little bit. The levels of communication between referee and player, to me, has to be of a. And that's why one of the great things about watching rugby, I don't watch a huge amount, but when you do, I think that's the thing that stands out in terms of how like the referees are willing. Okay, might be only the captains, and it's slower, and there's more breaks in place. There's more opportunities for them to talk to them. But certainly I think it's something that is a positive when a good referee does it.
It seems like the best way to hold them to account in terms of communication is actually put a mic on them. At least that way you can identify which NFL refs are making the bad decisions, because the entire stadium and the entire world hears them. Same at rugby.
Yeah, I think so. And I know there was a bit of controversy a couple of years ago over the documentary about the All-Ireland football final. Was it the Dublin Kerry one where it was mic'd up, and it was the low scoring day, and it was tough conditions. But okay, again, there's things you might need to flag. Players and management might need to know that in advance. But is that a bad thing, that if a player knows that he's going to be, like, it's mic'd up again, does that make them behave a little bit better?
Completely.
I don't see an issue with it. So, it might be a bad idea, particularly the inter-county out. Like, obviously, people always throw in, if you're talking about rule changes, talking about different things, it's not scalable to club games. So that's okay maybe at the start, but we still have an inter-county football and hurling product that's there at the moment that should be done to the highest level. So if you can help and it might help a referees might say, well, do you know what, we'll come out of this learning from it, and like people on the outside will get to learn, well, what are we hearing and what are we having to deal with on the pitch, you know?
Well, that's the thing, if people see inter-county footballers behaving in a better way, then will the club players not behave in a better way as well? Is it just because it's fair game at all levels? It's a top-down approach, surely.
I think so, yeah, and I think it's certainly worth looking into. And again, like, we often talk about rule changes, and it's a big thing at the moment in football. Like, you know, the way the game is going, and it's so defensive, and bodies back behind the ball, and all this type of stuff. And people like Eamon Fitzmaurice talking about 2 referees. Again, I don't disagree with that, but I'd actually like to know what referees think about the game in terms of, like, again, maybe during the off season. And I know you don't want referees coming out publicly in the sense of what's happened this week, but certainly there's enough referees who are smart, understand the game, and they might be able to come up and say, well, do you know what, here's a suggestion we have that might help us do the game.
Totally.
And, you know, so I think there has to be those lines of communication across the board. I think once they're, I think the better they are and the more open they are, I think the better game we'll end up getting.
Let's talk a little bit about the football, because it shouldn't have been overshadowed this week. They're 2 really properly mouth-watering games. Galway will believe they have a good chance against Dublin by virtue of the performance they put in the league against them, and yet it's hard for me to understand exactly where Dublin are. Like, it felt like Dublin have played within themselves, even within the Super 8s, like even within games. Now the Tyrone game maybe is an indication that they're not as far along as they thought they were, or as we thought they were, but the Donegal game, like, they were massively in control of that game really from the get-go. So what's the truth?
I think they were massively in control of the Tyrone game as well, to be perfectly honest. I was up in Omagh that day, and I was really impressed with them. And again, I think someone said to me beforehand the game was played on Tyrone, or at half time the game has been played on Tyrone's terms, but Dublin were 2 up at half time. Tyrone never really had that purple patch where, you know, you felt like the crowd really got into it, and Dublin were under pressure. They never got a run of 4 or 5 scores. They never got a goal, and it felt like Dublin, okay, they ended up winning by a goal, and the last couple of minutes tightened up a little bit, but I think it was very much, they would have been very happy in terms of how they controlled the game, it felt like they were never really on that back foot, you know, and I don't think a team has put them there this year. And Galway in the league final were probably one of the closest to do it, but I suppose after the last week we're probably second guessing now where Galway at, and have they put so much into getting to this stage of the year? Have they kind of peaked already? You know, are they better than where they were when they played the league final? I would say Dublin are definitely better. They haven't really produced that eye-catching performance just yet. You know, they haven't really clicked up front where you know, like they obviously put up a big score against Roscommon, but where you see, you know, Conor O'Callaghan, Paul Mannion, a couple of these guys haven't scored as much in recent games, and you're kind of wondering, is there a little bit of doubt there from whether they have that in them this year? They seem to be kind of more, it's not as swashbuckling, I suppose, in terms of going forward with the ball. There's not as many really, really fluid moves where you go, that was really slick, that was really nice to watch, you know, but they've been really efficient and they're getting through games. And I think that is the question, whether Galway have kind of they're kind of on the way down from their year's work, or whether they have another big performance in them this weekend.
Alan Brogan was saying in the Herald this morning that when you compare this team to 2013, clearly that 2013 team has a better collection of individuals, but this team is a better collective. Would you agree with that?
Possibly. I think it's hard. Like, some of those players that you're taking out of that 2013 team, like obviously Bernard was a scoring machine at that time. Dermot obviously was that kind of X factor, and even Paul Flynn when he was at his height. But maybe Niall Scully and these guys possibly don't get the credit they deserve yet. Like, Niall's getting through a lot of work, but the 2 goals he scored against Donegal and Croke Park that day, brilliant goals, brilliant individual goals, and people probably don't see him as a scorer. He wouldn't be as consistent yet as maybe what Paul Flynn got to, but again, if he's chipping in with a goal or 2, if he can produce moments like that, then And again, the likes of Con obviously last year, some of the goals he scored, I actually, some people again are talking about how Con is struggling a little bit this year. I don't know that he's struggling. His finishing probably hasn't been to the same level. But he's had 2 or 3 goal chances in a lot of games. So, bar the Tyrone game, I think there wasn't too many goal chances created. And it feels like he's one early goal away from kicking back into life again. And I wouldn't be overly...
kind of terrifying.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be overly concerned if, like, you saw the early goals he scored last year against Tyrone in the semi-final, and then against Mayo in the final. And again, he's creating those chances. And again, in the Leinster final, the Laois goalkeeper Graham Brody made a couple of brilliant saves from. He's making a couple of really athletic saves. So, if you weigh it up pound for pound at the moment, probably that 2013 forward line. But they were probably a bit further along in their career. I think if you give the likes of Scully and even Brian Howard's probably going to end up playing wing forward at the weekend, like where they're going in their first year or two, I think that's probably, you probably need to give them a bit of time before you compare like for like.
Who's replacing Howard in the backs?
Well, I suppose when I say in the half forward line, he'll certainly play around the middle third. As in, I think if you look at the Tyrone games, probably the last game to look at, and I think Jack McCaffrey or John Small effectively came in for, was it Paddy Andrews, so they were effectively named as a forward, but I would imagine they more lined up in the half back line, and Brian Howard would have played in around either midfield or half forward. So it's kind of, that middle third is pretty fluid in that Dublin team. So again, if I would say, I would expect Jack certainly to play, and I personally would pick John Small every time. So I think if you're putting those 2 guys into the half back line with Keane O'Sullivan, then you'll likely see Brian Howard push a little bit more forward.
So this is the first choice team that we're going to see maybe for the first time this year?
Yeah, now I don't know what it is in the sense that like that is there a conversation to, like Cormac Oslo showed very well again against Roscommon. Okay, you've got the caveat saying, well, Roscommon had nothing to play for and a bit of a challenge game feel to, but Cormac's been very good in the last couple of games. And again, you're talking about the forward line being more of a unit. To me, without Dermot and possibly without Bernard up to the same level, I think Cormac is probably that X factor. Cormac and Conor, the 2 forwards in that Dublin team at the moment, who when they get the ball, they do that. They're likely to do that something different, and they can get, they're asking different questions of defenders. They're more dynamic. They can go right foot, left foot, and so Cormac is probably one of the ones that you could argue whether he's back in, whether he's into that best 15 or not, and he's probably the one pushing, particularly from a forward perspective, what way he's going to go.
Does everything else pick itself a little bit?
I'm very interested to see what they do with Owen Merchant. I think he's been very, very good. And the couple of games he's played was probably a bit of a shock for people to see outside of Dublin for him to start the Donegal game. But he was really impressive for me against Donegal and against Tyrone. And he kind of had man-to-man roles in both of them, but they were a little bit further out the pitch. So again, I was saying I would see Jack and John Small and Keane in the half-back line. So do they pick Owen then in the full-back line? And if they Galway tend to play, like you've an Ian Burke there playing corner forward who's very, very good. Yeah. Merchant obviously doesn't match up with Damien Comer, so again, do you put Owen Merchant on a Shane Malcher and Ian Burke, I presume, is the question this weekend. But then you've obviously got Johnny Cooper, Philly McMahon, Mick Fitz, so do one of them lose out for Owen Merchant? So I suppose then that's probably the other question for me. Merchant's a very, very good defender, very, very quick, probably one of the fastest on the Dublin squad. So again, for pace in terms of he did his role brilliantly in the 2 games against Donegal and Tyrone, kind of tracking the kind of playmakers a little bit deeper. So, well, again, the question probably is whether they trust him to do one in the full back line this weekend, or whether you go back to one of the other guys.
Yeah, okay. We've got Lee Keegan with us as well. Lee, good morning to you.
How you doing, lads? How are you?
Yeah, good. So we're talking about this Galway Dublin match and trying to get a handle on where both teams are, and it's hard to fully assess because we kind of haven't seen both of them at full board just as recently as we would have liked to. Where do you think Galway are at the moment, for example?
I suppose last weekend, I suppose a lot of people have discussed Galway saying what a poor performance it was against Monaghan, and that they had one eye in this game, and they probably did. They were in an unusual position where they were top of the group at the time. They were already qualified. But if I were in the Galway camp, I would have been quite disappointed. It was your last home game of the year, you're playing one of the top teams in Monaghan, and judging by the way they named their team, I fully expect them that they're going to go for that game last weekend, and they just look so flat and lethargic. So if I was in the Galway camp this week, I'd be looking for a huge backlash, particularly now we're coming up to HU against Dublin, who again look to be kind of in 3rd or 4th gear at the moment, and we got to see a lot of their kind of, I suppose, fringe players against Roscommon. And the worry for Galway is a lot of them look really hungry and really fresh, as Mossy said there, the likes of I I suppose Cormac Castle hit 9 points the weekend, looks really fresh, really enthusiastic about getting a game time at the weekend, and instead of kind of blowing a huff about it, they're really hungry to get back in the pitch and start against Galway. So it's a funny one for Galway, but I fully expect them to really push Dublin hard at the weekend. I expect big performances from the likes of Damien Comer, who caused huge hassle in the league back in the league final there a few months ago. Shane Welch needs to step up again at the weekend. I thought he's very quiet. A lot of the key players. I think the biggest problem for Galway is missing Paul Conroy in the middle. He just has that kind of dynamic to get up and down the pitch. You know, we can chip him with a couple of scores. So he's definitely a guy that they're going to miss hugely. But I expect Galway to have a huge backlash from last weekend.
When you guys were coming up against Dublin, what particular shape were you trying to affect on the game? Like as a group, how did you want to play? What were you trying to do to get Dublin out of their rhythm?
I think Dublin have cracked nearly every game plan out at the stage between defensive, man-to-man. I suppose in terms of ourselves, we very much went man-to-man predominantly on their kick-out. Now, not the easy thing to do when you're playing a team as fit and as hungry as Dublin. So, but I suppose we had a team that were well, I suppose, physically and mentally able to match them for long periods of time. So we tried frustrating their kick-outs as much as possible and try and get a half forward back to protect maybe our midfield half-back line. Now, in saying that, the way Dublin can move the ball from one end to another is a different nature. So, you know, at times we struggle, at times we did really well. But I suppose we tried cracking the kick out to a degree. Now, you're not going to do it for a full game. If we got 5 or 6 kickouts, which is the target of ours usually, then we're doing really well. We knew we were rightly in the game. And I suppose the biggest thing for us is not to be, I suppose, 5 or 6 points down after 15 minutes. We always target the first 15 minutes. Like, granted, they got the goal early in the All-Ireland final last year, but we responded quite well, and we were very much in the game at half time. We really frustrated their forwards. We really ran hard at them from different angles. So for Galway, I think the running game will really suit maybe at the weekend. You know, they like to drop deep, and players like Shane Welch, players like Kip Brannigan, Daly, these guys have huge pace, and they need to exploit them kind of space in Grove Park and really run at Dublin, because they have the athleticism, they have the youth, and they have that fitness that we've seen over the last few months. Like, they've only lost 2 games in 14, so like there's no reason why they can't go at them the way they did in the league final.
When you guys were trying to create chances as well, it's interesting to hear you talk about running at angles, because when you think back, that's exactly how people will remember the goals that you guys have scored against them, your own in particular. So was that part of it as well, or did those chances, is that something that evolved in the middle of the game? Had you identified that in the build-up? Look, if we get a ball, just keep possession and keep running. Yeah,
we did, and I suppose there's no such thing as you can plan for a goal, or, you know, it takes time, and we worked on different pieces in training up to the All-Ireland, and especially playing in Dublin different games. So, like, I think the thing with Dublin is you're definitely going to get chances, which we found we were always going to get, but it's how many of them goal chances can you convert, and unfortunately we only ever scored 1 maybe in each of the finals, and it just wasn't enough, because again they have too many players that can go off the bench, too many good players up front that can score a lot of points. Like Dean Rock punished us big time last year in the All-Ireland. You know, he had a lot of his frees. So I suppose our biggest strength was at the time was we really ran hard at them from different angles. I suppose we tried getting the ball wide and created, I suppose, that kind of gap in the centre, because we identified Keegan Sullivan being their main man that really protects their full back line. And it's just his reading of the game has just been outstanding. I think he's been one of the best centre backs over the last 5 years in terms of his reading, his the way he plays the game, the way he just covers every angle for Dublin there. So, but we definitely identified a couple of guys that we could really run hard at and exploit, especially if we got a turnover them. So that was definitely one of our real, I suppose, positives when we were going to Dublin, that if we got a turnover and we ran really hard at Dublin, that we would create goal chances or a free or a scoring chance. And you know what, we did that for a lot of the part in the finals. But when you're coming up against a different beast in the last quarter that can just bring on some of the best players of the bench, then you're really starting to struggle, and the lungs are really starting to burn.
Yeah. Lee, do you subscribe to the theory that Dublin haven't shown up fully in any All-Ireland final? Because it seems that was a little bit of an injustice to Mayo. It seems that you've got to take some credit as well for shutting them down to a certain extent and giving the illusion that they're not living up to the excellence that they show all the way through and up to including All-Ireland semi-finals over this 3 in a row so far.
I think that'd be probably a bit disrespectful to Dublin, to be honest. I think All-Ireland are hard won. People always kind of harp on about our kind of hard luck story and sob story, but I suppose when you're coming up against a team of the nature that you mentioned, Dublin, you know, they had to turn up to play it. If they didn't, we would have won basically, because we played well enough in last year's final and the year before to win the games. Now, granted, we were very lucky in the drawing game back in 16 with the 2 goals. Maybe that was the only time that we can probably have a little sulk about. But I would say probably very harsh Dublin. Like Dublin just, I suppose, have been there over the last number of years. And Mossy, you know yourself that when it comes to the crunch time of games and you look at Dublin, they never panic. They just seem to, they really just follow what they're really been, like trained wise. Like they get the ball. Like when I scored the goal last year, I openly said it, that you look at the Dublin guys and they just didn't flinch. Like it was all about getting the next ball, and James McCarthy goes up and scores a point, or Dean Rock gets a free, pops over the bar, and it's like them scores that really deflated us last year when we thought we had the game. Not thought the game won, but we had a huge momentum behind us, and it's just the way Dublin can handle them different types of pressure. And I would think it was injustice that you'd say Dublin had to work really hard when they're all Irelands against us. We worked them really, really hard. And I think, if you look at the games over last year, if you look at the accumulation of scores in the final, it's only been a point each game or something like that. So, like, for Dublin, we went hard at Dublin for them a number of years. And obviously it's very disappointing saying that we didn't win one, but you have to give full credit to Dublin that, when it came down to the crunch time in each of them games, they just had the player and had the experience to get over the line.
Mossy, it's interesting to hear Lee talking there about the chances that teams get against Dublin, and that's true. We've seen even the worst teams in Leinster be able to create goal chances against this Dublin side because they're not as compact a defensive unit as some of the other teams that are out there, and yet they've actually got better as a defensive unit as the seasons have gone on. So will there be chances for Galway this weekend to run those angles that, remember Lee Keegan's goal in particular last year?
I think there will be, and again, it's the nature of playing against Dublin and the system Dublin play. They kind of back themselves. They, again, up in Alma that night, they were very much playing two men in their full back line. A couple of balls came in 50-50 and Johnny Cooper burst out with them and ends up winning them, and there's a lot of trust that Jim puts into his team, and to me it's the sign of a very well coached team. They're very good players, but having the likes of Keane O'Sullivan there obviously helps. But I think that the coaching that's been done within the Dublin team in terms of how they want to work, how they want to set up, and they're willing to, they can play different styles. Like if a team wants to get 13 behind the ball and force Dublin to be patient with it, they can obviously be patient with it, and that's being patient with the ball and without the ball. They're not going to go gung-ho like they did, and they obviously learned so much from the Donegal game a couple of years ago, and I think that's highlighted by the fact that you can input different personnel into that defence, and it's still pretty similar, and I think that's what I mean about it being very well coached. You're not relying on one or two individuals, and but look, the way the system goes, if teams are willing to get the ball, I think you have to, like what Lee was saying, I think you have to play man to man. I don't know that a counter-attacking team is going to beat Dublin at the moment. I don't think Dublin are going to get caught by that again. I think Dublin have to have a really, really bad day for that to happen. So I think any team that's going to be good enough to beat Dublin is going to have to be willing to go at them a little bit. They're going to have to go let ball in early, get runners coming off the shoulder, pace. That the flip to that is, if it doesn't work and you get turned over, if Dublin turn you over, like turnover, obviously some of the biggest goal chances come from when you turn someone else over. Lee said it, when they target trying to turn Dublin over, it means you can't get a chance to get set up. It means Keane O'Sullivan might be in that position. It means one of the defenders are generally reacting rather than being proactive and being set, and I think that's the big thing. That's where Dublin thrive off that, the amount of goals Dublin get off turning over opposition teams, and then they get the runners coming and they've got the overlap going. And I think that's, again, Galway have to be brave. I think any team that's going to really take Dublin on have to be brave, and Mayo have been that in the last couple of years. The character and the kind of desire for Mayo to really push it is why they've gotten as close as they have, and why they're the team that have pushed Dublin the closest.
Lee, one of the things that we always did in the media in particular was like, how do you beat Dublin? And that was kind of maybe misreading how Dublin were winning games, because Dublin were clearly identifying the opposition strengths and going after them very quickly as well. So maybe what we should have been doing all these years was, how will Dublin actually beat Mayo? How will Dublin this weekend beat Galway? How will they nullify Comer? How will they nullify Walsh? What will they do, do you think?
I suppose Mossy just kind of touched there. Like I mentioned, Galway's running game could hurt Dublin, but I suppose the flip side of that is, if Galway decides to play, I suppose, not in a negative fashion, but in a very conservative fashion, like we've seen the Donegal, the Tyrones over the last couple of years, Dublin have really cracked that code. So if Galway's at the weekend, like I think you're just going to be in for a bit of, I wouldn't say a big win, but I'd say Dublin are just going to be very comfortable in how they're going to handle that, because they've done it so often. What I find interesting in league final is when Galway did run hard at them and they did commit numbers, the damage that like the Comer would do, particularly in the first half. And then with the flip side of that, in the second half, when they were retrieving too many numbers back, when the game was in the melting pot and they were trying to hang on for 1 point lead, you could see the frustration starting to come to the likes of the Comer, the Burks, the Welshes, because the ball's not getting up there, because Dublin realised, if I squeeze these now, we have a huge chance of getting a turnover or a score here. And as we said, Dublin thrive in that, and that's where they get their goal chances, their scores, their frees, whatever it is. So I really do think Galway have to be brave here at the weekend. It's their first semi-final in a long time, so there's no point in conservative and you're looking back after the game thinking that we could have went for this. I think they have the calibre of the players to do it, in the likes of the Shane Wells, Shane Burke, the Comers. These guys they're really class forwards, top forwards, and they need to get ball. They can't be starving the ball. And what frustrates Galway, I suppose, what frustrates viewers is seeing the likes of Comer back in the full back line or half back line because the ball is not getting up to him. Sure, Dublin will be only laughing at that because he's 80 yards away from goal. What damage are you going to do there? So I think, Kevin Walsh has a lot of big decision this week in terms of what way he's going to set up. Now, obviously, I do expect Galway to drop numbers back. Their half of the wing backs naturally do it anyway. You've seen that in most of the games this year, but I just love to see them just, really get the first ball and go really hard at Dublin from the throw in and just see how, I suppose, they react to that. If they get an early goal chance or an early point chance or whatever it is, and see how they react from the kick out after that. But I think Galway need to be really brave because I think Dublin will know what way they're going to set up, and if they do that the way we're thinking they are, well, then I think Dublin have the game all day.
Yeah, just on that Damien Comer point, Lee, just to quote Darragh O'Shea yesterday for anybody who missed his column, he says, for one thing, I don't think they've solved the Damien Comer problem. Since he rampaged around Croke Park against Dublin in the league final, he hasn't had too many standout games. Roscommon held him out at the Connacht final until the closing few minutes. He had a bit of joy against Kildare, all right, but Kerry and Monaghan both kept him to a point. Do you think that's a fair appraisal of his summer so far, Lee?
I would say probably it's a true reflection, but not in himself, because I think it's more frustration that ball's not going into him, to be honest. Again, I know I said a running team sometimes can hurt them, but when you have a forward that's as strong and as good as Comer, you need to get the ball to him. And he was one of the guys we identified hugely over the last couple of years, and he's caused us hassle numerous times. I thought we got to grips him well in our championship game, but if you're forward that class and that calibre and he's not going to get ball, you can see how frustrated it is. And Mossy, yourself as a forward, you're not getting the ball in there. You're not going to make the runs because the ball is never going to come into you again. So I suppose the thing is to do is you just start drifting back and back and back. Before you know it, you're in your own half-back line picking up soft ball. And we mentioned about Michael Murphy against Dublin as well, that he was playing in the half-back kind of midfield role. Sure, you're talking about one of the best forwards of a generation that's 50, 60, 70 yards away from goal. What damage are you going to do there? Because the ball has not been kicked into him. So I think it's important that Galway recognise the likes of getting Ian Burke on the ball, that we've seen him assisting in so much over the games, get his hands on the ball. And look to use Shane Wells, look to use Comer, look to use the runners like Brannick and Daly and these guys coming into the game. I think that's hugely important for Galway at the weekend. And if they don't do that, then Dublin will sniff that out, and they'll be looking at winning by 5, 6, 7, 8 points, and before you know it, the game is over.
And the flip to that is just that not only is Comer taken away from a Galway attacking perspective, Philly McMahon generally marks if there's a big physical forward, so similar to what Aidan O'Shea would have been, or Michael Murphy. Philly usually goes in on that. So think about from a Dublin perspective, where does Philly want to play the game? Philly wants to be as far away from the Dublin goal.
Full forward, basically.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. But as in, he doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to be in the full back line, in his own full back line for 70 minutes. So if Damien Comer drifts and ends up playing around midfield, all of a sudden Philly McMahon's thinking, this is brilliant, I have a bit of freedom here. And not only is he not, he doesn't have to pay as close attention to Damien Comer, because if he's 50 or 60 yards from goal, he knows he's got a couple of teammates close to him that he's not going to score, and he's not going to score a goal from there, obviously. So then Philly gets the opportunity to go and play. So not only are you taking away from Galway's attacking threat, you're adding then to Dublin's attacking ability.
Exactly.
And I think that's one thing Galway can't fall into that trap, or teams playing against Dublin can't fall into that trap, which they have done in the past.
So you need to pin Dublin, certain key Dublin players in the full back line, like whoever is marking him.
I just think, again, it goes back to that word, you have to go for the game. I think if you kind of drop back into your shell and continuously drop fellas back deeper and deeper, and again, Keane O'Sullivan plays a kind of a sweeping role, and there's a lot of the language used around defensive systems in football can be a bit frustrating at times. People say, they play sweepers or they play mass defence. What's a mass defence? Is it 13 behind the ball? Is it? I don't really have an issue with teams having working wing forwards where 10 and 12 drop back at times, and all of a sudden, but you still have 4 forwards up there, and then you might free a wing back. And Mayo have done that brilliantly in the past, and I know under Pat Gilroy that's the kind of system we would have tried to play with Dublin, but you would have tried to keep 4 forwards up. I wouldn't consider that an overly defensive system, whereas. And again, Dublin at the moment, when you said, how do you make Dublin mark someone? If a high ball is pumped in on top of Damien Comer, you might see Johnny Cooper in what looked like in a sweeping role, but Dublin will effectively still only have 4 defenders or 5 defenders max, because opposition teams will have dropped everyone else back. So he's not technically a sweeper. You've got your kind of 4 or 5 defenders. They'll probably keep a +1, at times maybe a +2 back there, but it wouldn't be a situation if other teams played 6 forwards. they're not going to bring another sweeper back and have that extra defender at all times.
Yeah.
I think it's more a case of if opposition teams are sending their own forwards back, then it makes sense to keep an extra guy back there. So I think it's more about keeping defenders honest. I'm a big believer in that. I think the further your key forwards are away from the goal, the easier it is for the opposition to kind of say, well, look, they're not going to do any real damage here, you know. So I think any team you play against,
and then they're safe to go and overload the attack by joining in with it.
Well, there's a bit of freedom. There's a bit of freedom there that, again, where Keane O'Sullivan might be more content to sit, whereas Philly might get on a ball and say, do you know what, I have an opportunity here, and Philly's kick passing is very good. He can give, he can go, you know. So so from that side of things, it just changes the dynamic of it. Whereas if he's in his own full back line, he's obviously not in a position to say, right, well, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to bomb forward here as many times as possible, you know. So I think it's about keeping what
we tried to do last year, Mossy. We actually, what we tried to do was create something, especially with Andy. We knew Andy's moving aside was key to keep the likes of, like, we identified Fitzsimons as a really top defender, but we said if we keep him really deep, that might occupy Keane O'Sullivan, so it might give our centre forward that bit more time. So we got quite a bit of joy from that as well, where Andy was moving left and right. Now, not necessarily might get the ball, but we had a bit of space to run in the middle then with our midfielders, half forwards, half back. So, you know, we as Matt said, we were keeping their forwards, our defenders really honest with a lot of off the ball running, and particularly leaving Andy as a pivot in there for our runners to come off. And ultimately, we actually got the goal off that because it was his third, fourth, fifth run that got on the ball, and it was just a pop off and put in the back of the net. So it's stuff like that where I think they can use Ian Burke to set up a Welsh or a Comer. So I think that's really important, and that dynamic, you said, is hugely important to keep their defenders honest.
So that template is there really for Galway to have a look and see exactly how you guys have got joy against them over the years. Have Dublin evolved looking at them this year, Lee? Do you think, like, have they become a different team who actually learned from the example of what you guys were doing to them last year?
I fully agree. I think Dublin have realised that the nature of the way they played since probably 2013 or 12, that running, like that, I suppose, that craziness in games that's between ourselves, particularly that up and down has, you've seen them mature really in the way they've, I suppose, kept the width of the pitch, how they're adapted to keeping the ball for a long period of time. And people maybe have an issue with this for keeping 4 or 5 minutes of the game, but to be honest, when you're good enough to do it, you can do it, and Dublin are good enough to do it. So I think if you look, they're not going up and down, they're not going to hold for full games at a time. They're really patient, really measured in how they're attacking teams now. And I suppose you see the way they're looking at teams, they've identified that maybe if there is a mass defence, or if they're man-to-man, or if they're dropping forwards, Dublin seem to figure it out very well in the early stage of games. And I think that's a real sign of maturity, and it's a real sign of a winning team, and they've won over the years because they've adapted quicker than other teams, and they've reacted so much quicker than what we have thrown at them or any other team has thrown at them. So I've seen a huge level of maturity shown in the Dublin team, and it's the same guys over there over the last number of years. You know, we're talking about the Keane O'Sullivans, the James McCarthy's, who again is having another terrific year for Dublin, really driving them on. Brian Fenton again seems to be getting better. Kieran Kilkenny, these guys have been around a long time, and they're only getting better, and they're in the prime of their football career. So I've seen a huge maturity in the way they're setting up their team, the way they're playing the football, and again, I expect the exact same performance again on Saturday against Galway. We had
Eamon Fitzmaurice on the show yesterday, and Owen was talking to him a bit about how obsessed you must be as a footballer or involved with football at the moment when there is one of the greatest teams of all time in their pomp. And he was making the point early on in his career, he definitely would have thought a lot about them, but as time progressed, he needed to think about himself and his own team a bit more. I think maybe with Dublin maturing the way they are, it's time for everybody to get obsessed again and kind of see how they can counteract what Dublin are doing, particularly this season.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose the biggest thing from our group when we play them, we try not to get obsessed with Dublin, because I think a lot of teams, if you get too obsessed with what they're doing or what they're going to bring, then I think you're taking away from your own game. And what we did is we did so much analysis of them with Donny Buckley and these guys who do ample amount of work behind the scenes. But from players, I suppose we know that their players so well, we know their system. So for us, when we played them, we just didn't get obsessed with them so much, because I suppose in earlier years, that's the way we maybe looked at games, that we had to beat them, we had to do this, if we didn't do this, what's going to happen? So we just went in and we tried to implement our own game plan from start to finish. And, you know, we got huge success because of that, because we weren't worried that Jack McCaffrey was going to take off every 5 minutes, or Brian Fenton was going to catch every ball. You know, we worried about the guys that are on the pitch for ourselves. And I think teams need to take this new philosophy that, you know, Dublin are one of the greatest teams, and we know that, and that's not going to change overnight. So it's just about trying to, I suppose, how can we stamp our own game on this match? And like, I go to have a huge chance this weekend. Like, a lot of them are in the prime of their shape as well. Like I just think instead of becoming obsessed with Dublin, become obsessed with your own game and how you're going to work that at the weekend. And Galway have a huge chance here. If they've any bit of belief or any bit of craziness about them at the weekend, they're just going to go for this game. And I think that's huge the weekend. And, I think it's really important that Fitzmaurice said that. I think we just get too obsessed with, I suppose, Dublin. Yes, they are the greatest team, but how can we change that in our own group? How can we, we need to change our game. We need to do something different because it's just what we're doing at the moment is not working.
That's fair enough. Lee, we'll let you go. One last question though. I've seen several newspapers call you Leroy Keegan in print recently. We were like, is this an official name change? Should we be calling you Leroy? What's the crack?
Just decided to put the Roy on for a bit more interest. So the birth name is Lee, but Leroy adds a bit more dynamic.
Grand. And so are we officially now? Is this it? Like in public, we should call you Leroy from now on?
Yeah, Leroy's good. I don't mind that. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Nice one. Perfect. We'll go with that. Leroy, good man. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Take care.
Leroy Keegan with us this morning.
I love that. It adds a bit more dynamic. That's so much going on in that phrase.
Yeah.
Leroy Keegan. Wow, it's because we'd seen it in reports. We'd seen
just casually slipped in.
Yeah,
out of nowhere.
In like serious.
It's his Twitter handle as well. So it's it's his own. It's obviously something he's.
It is his Twitter handle. I looked it up there, but actually it's still Lee Keegan. You know the way you kind of have your name, you can change it now, and it's like so. And you'll have to change that one too. There is this sense though that like when Dublin innovate, everybody has to come back and look and go, well, what are they doing this year that's a bit different? It's probably not that much different from last year. It's just more pronounced, I would suggest, that they've got better at the recycling of the ball, that they've come up against teams where it's been more profitable for them to recycle the ball and keep it for as long as they have. Like last year against Tyrone, they just went and killed them in the first 20 minutes. And then they played effectively the last 50 minutes of that game recycling the ball because the match was over.
Yeah, I think so. I think they are just evolving. Like in fairness to them, and that's again going back to how well coached they are. They don't just sit and say, "Well, we won the All Ireland last year. Let's kind of go and do the same thing again." And for me, you can break the game down into a certain amount of plays. And I think when Lee, like even when Lee referenced there when he got the goal last year, Dublin didn't flinch. I think one of the great things and the testament to why they've won so many close games in the last few minutes of games, even as you're going into, even as the clock ticks into the 69, 70 minutes, there's generally 5-6 minutes left to go. Dublin are smart enough and they're so prepared, so well coached that they know, well, we're still going to have 4, 5, 6 plays here where we're going to have 6 attacks. Can we score twice in these 6 attacks? Can we stop them scoring? And when you can break it down and when you're that well tuned in, it gives you that kind of certainty. It gives you that ability to perform in those situations. And I fully agree with what he said about getting obsessed with other teams, because when we were in the 2000s, we came up against the Tyrone team that were an incredible team, and even the Kerry team at that time, and we lost games to them, and we used to spend so much time, probably Tyrone more so nearly than Kerry. I don't know whether people, and even at that, I think a lot of teams, when I was coming into the game, a lot of teams looked at the Armagh team in 2002 and then Tyrone when they came in and kind of took over. And I don't know whether they felt that was more, it was easier to replicate that than whereas you kind of looked at Kerry and said, oh, well, that's just Kerry, and you didn't kind of look at what they did. Whereas you're kind of looking saying, well, if Armagh could do it or Tyrone can do it, then why can't we do that? And we would have spent a lot of time looking at them and trying to work out, well, can we do what they do? But I think it did take a bit of time to realise that there's no point trying to mimic them. You don't have the same personnel, you don't have the same skill set, so you can't mimic what a Jack McCaffrey can do or what a Brian Fenton can do. But can you tweak it, or can you learn from them? Can you look and say, well, what do they do when they have the ball? They keep that space. Well, how does that relate into our system? Which goes back to what Lee was saying. You have to find something that works for particularly the group of guys that you have there. You can't just say, well, Dublin play that system, I'm going to play that system, or we couldn't say Tyrone play that system, because if you don't have a Brian McGuigan or whoever it might be that maybe pulls the strings for a team, or and I think you have to be smart enough, and I think good coaches you have to tweak it to suit yourself rather than saying, well, that's what the best team do, let's just go and do that, because it's not as simple as that. Yeah,
like this Galway team, it's very interesting when you look at that period at the end of every game where Dublin, if they're anyway in the game, they're going to win the game, whereas with Galway, like Eamon Donoghue was writing in the Irish Times this morning and points out statistically how good Galway are in the last 15 minutes, that this could be the first time we've seen now where it's level pegging heading into the end of the game, and you actually give the opposition to Dublin a real chance. Yeah, well,
to me, the reason Dublin finished strong and winning so many games is because they've the best squad. They've the best 21, 22 guys, and until someone comes up, it's not just the 15 anymore. And we've been saying it for a couple of years, and I think that's one of the reasons why they are as good as they are, that they know they've guys who can come in and make an impact. So if 1 or 2 guys are having an off day or someone picks up an injury, Dublin generally don't feel that as key as some other teams might do. But I actually think this weekend's going to be really physical. I think that the league final was quite a physical game. I think Galway will need to bring that element of really challenging Dublin players in different ways. And I think if they do stand off them and let them play, I think they will be picked apart. And I think there might be close for 50, 55, 60 minutes, but there will be that sense of inevitability. The last 10 minutes, Dublin will probably just pull away. And that's if they don't do what they did to Tyrone and get a good start. Like if Dublin get an early goal and go 4 or 5 points up, you'd imagine most of the ground would be like, well, can Galway come and chase the game? Is that the way they're built, you know? So
the one thing is that Dublin haven't so far this year, and they haven't needed to because of the circumstances, they haven't killed teams in that circuit. Like they did the lesser teams in Leinster, but in the Super 8s they kind of they played around. I would expect this.
They did a little bit, and that was the one thing up in Alma. They were halfway through the second half, they were really comfortable. They probably went 4 or 5, maybe. I don't know if they hit 6 up, but they were certainly 5 up at one stage, and you kind of had the sense that if they really went after it, they might have gone further in front. Now the flip to that is they might say, well, then are we leaving ourselves exposed to give away a goal, and the whole blows the game back open again. So but yeah, they probably were a little bit more, because I know, for instance, when Kevin McMenamin came on, he added that little bit of pace, a little bit of directness, and there was a couple of times he made really good runs and he was on the shoulder once or twice and it wasn't given to him. The ball was recycled and they came back out, whereas I was kind of sitting there going, okay, that ball definitely could have been given to him, or maybe last year, the year before, it was given to him and Kevin runs in and try to create, like he did score a point. Yeah, he did score a point that night. He got fouled for a free. So there was a little bit, the few times he did get the ball going forward, he made a positive attack and play, whereas there was 3 or 4 more opportunities that could have gone to him that didn't, and Dublin were content to keep possession for an extra minute. Now, I would say Dublin, when they're not keeping possession just for the sake of keeping possession most of the time. They are trying to kill the game. And to kill the game and to draw a defence out. A lot of the time it is because they've so many men back, and if you draw it out, then you do have that pop ball. The last score I think they did get up in Tyrone came from something like that, where they eventually did draw Tyrone. Tyrone were getting really desperate, but it took until nearly injury time for Tyrone to be willing to commit that forward, and then Paul Flynn is in on the end of it and he kicks the game sealing score. So it is a fine balance, but I think Dublin are probably erring on the side of, well, let's just kill the game rather than let's hold possession, score a goal. So I think that's maybe something they might look, if they're a little bit more aggressive this weekend, you might see that.
All right, good stuff. Mossy, enjoy the game. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Chair.